And now, in studio, bringing his Midwest values from the Show Me State to the land of San Diego. He's a triple threat, licensed as an attorney, mortgage broker, and a top producing realtor who's crushing the competition. Here to deliver you what's happening in the trenches of the market. Your host, Michael Gaddis.
Welcome back to the Michael Gaddis Show on AM 1170 The Answer. I am your host, Michael Gaddis of michaelgaddis.com and frontierloangroup.com. We're continuing our conversation today with Brenda Geiger of geigerlawoffice.com. Brenda is a renowned estate planning attorney. And, you know, I'll tell you something, Brenda. One of the things that I run across, you know, I help a lot of people with reverse mortgages. And one of the requirements of reverse mortgages is that the reverse mortgage lender needs to review trust documents if the property is being held in a trust. You know, about 3 weeks ago, I visited a man in Oceanside who wanted to get a reverse mortgage, and I told him that. So he says, "Oh, I have my trust documents in the garage." I said, "Okay." So he went to the garage. I could hear him fumbling through things, opening file cabinets, and, you know, just like, you know, things being thrown around. And finally he comes out with this document which literally looked like a Civil War document. I mean, it was, the pages were yellow. It was, you know, it was like, I don't even know if they make paper like they had this was in, you know, it was just this weird paper. And he goes, "Oh, here's my trust document." I'm like, when did you have this trust done? He said, "Oh, about 25 years ago or so, like that." You know, and I'm not an estate planning attorney, but my initial thought was, he might need to have this reviewed again. What are your thoughts on that situation?
Yeah, I think one of the most frequent asked questions that I get is, and I got it asked yesterday when I met with a new client, is how often do I need to update my trust? How often do I need to take a look at it? You know, my best answer for how often you need to take a look at it is, you know, take a look at it as your annual review. When you're doing your taxes, pull it out, take a look, see if anything's changed in your family dynamics, see if, you know, everybody that you have in charge of your estate as power of attorney, healthcare, trustee, if they're all the same appropriate people, because those things do change over time. If you've got kids that are minors, make sure the guardians that you have listed are the right people, because things do change, family situations and dynamics change. The tax laws obviously change. I just wrote a presentation that I gave recently, and I didn't realize it had changed so many times, but in the last 15 years, the estate tax exemption, the amount that you can exclude before you have to pay estate taxes, has changed 12 times in 15 years. Is that just ridiculous?
That's crazy. That's crazy.
You know, so nothing's ever permanent in tax law. So those kinds of things may change the type of plan that you have, the type of trust that you have drafted, especially if you're married. So you've got to be looking at that stuff, but at least every couple of years, pull it out, take a look at the asset schedule, make sure it's updated, make sure all the people that you have in place are the right people, and, you know, see if there's anything that maybe your attorney can help you with to update that thing to make sure that it's going to, you know, it's going to be able to help you down the road. I always tell clients, I don't know what's going to happen to you in the future. I don't know what's going to happen to your kids. I would like to be prepared as best as I possibly can be, have all the tools in the toolbox to help them and make a course correction if I need to. But if I don't have it in my documents, I can't do it. I can be stuck. And there's some things the court can't help me with.
Well, you know, I think, you have a document, you gave me a document to review, and it's kind of a 26-point estate plan review checklist. Now, I'm assuming part of your practice is comprised of doing exactly that, correct? Reviewing people's trust, making sure that everything is, you know, up to code and up to speed, so to speak.
Yeah, about half of what I do is looking at old documents and producing an opinion letter.
And I want to stress to everybody out there that Brenda specializes in estate planning. I mean, this is what she does. I know a lot of people that that I've run across in the past. Some of them have either, you know, gone to their family attorney or, you know, their general practitioner attorney, or gone to, you know, maybe used a paralegal way back when. But, you know, my philosophy in life is, if you're going to do something like this, go to people who specialize in what they do. And that's what Brenda does. And so, you know, when she looks at something, she can see things that maybe a general practitioner or somebody else cannot see, because this is what she does on a daily basis. And so, when I'm looking through this 26, point estate plan review checklist, I'm assuming this is what you give the questionnaire that you give your clients when they come in.
We have an expanded questionnaire, but if we're going to be sitting down with somebody, we're bringing this out. And for our existing clients, sometimes we'll send this out to them. And we recently just started doing this by sending it to the client that we haven't seen in a while. And they love it. They love being able to check the box and say, yes, this has happened. And then come in and then we discuss it.
Well, I'm assuming that that you're asking these questions for a specific reason, because if they check a box that might be pertinent, it affects something that should be adjusted or looked at in their current trust. Is that correct?
Yeah, people don't know what they don't know, and that's why the checklist is so great.
Well, I'm going to read a few of these just to give people an idea of some of the changes that take place in a normal person's life that might affect their current trust. For example, it says, have you purchased or sold a home in the last 1 to 5 years? Have you purchased any rental property? Have you refinanced the mortgage on your home? Have there been any changes in your family since your last review? Births, deaths, divorces, marriage, reconciliations, or estrangements. Now that's a big one, because that happens all the time, right? People have grandchildren that are born, or people get divorced, people pass away. That's a really big one that can really affect a person's trust.
Yeah, absolutely, especially if you've listed one of those people in charge of your estate. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think it's really important that that you kind of really think about that. If you're listening right now and you think, well, that's right, I have a trust, and maybe you've had some grandchildren born, or maybe somebody in your family's been divorced or whatever. I think you really, really need to think about having that trust reviewed. You're listening to the Michael Gaddis Show on AM 1170 The Answer. I am your host, Michael Gaddis of michaelgaddis.com and frontierloangroup.com. I am speaking to Brenda Geiger of geigerlawoffice.com, and we're continuing our discussion on why you should have your current trust reviewed by someone like Brenda. So here's some other ones that were on here. Has there been a significant change in your health status since your last estate plan? Do you have any unmarried children that have turned 18 or left for college? So it goes on and on with questions like this. Now, let me ask you a question. We in the first segment we talked a little bit about that I think there's kind of my father's situation with his health, but as we were talking during the break, there's two kind of issues in this. It's a two-pronged issue. One, it's the medical decisions, and two, it's the financial decisions. And so when you do a trust or you review trust, do you look to make sure they have health care directives and things like that involved in their trust?
Yeah, when I'm doing a review, we always ask them for all of the documents that they have. Most of the time they do provide that, and I can let them know that, well, we've had an update to this particular document since the last time you had it executed. And also, even if that hasn't occurred, if the documents are more than maybe 5 to 8 years old on the healthcare directive, HIPAA, and power of attorney side, they may be stale. You may run the risk that a financial institution or hospital may not accept the document. So you just run that risk. Now, I think it's more prominent on the financial side, especially with a lot of the big box banks and financial institutions, because they have their own legal departments and they like to pick apart these things and say why they're not going to accept it. In my experience, they like to deal with trustees more than they do power of attorney agents. So most of the time, if it's my client, they already have a trust, everything's funded into the trust. But the power of attorney is really only going to control things like the filing of the tax return, the withdrawal of money from a retirement account, maybe some additional planning that we may need to do for the client on the elder law side if they're older, or maybe even on the tax planning side if their wealth grows and now they're incapacitated and their family's got to do some planning. So, I just caution people, make sure you've got fresh dates on your documents. Don't let it go too long.
Well, you mentioned something about trustees. The people like to work with trustees more than power of attorneys. Let me ask you a question. In my legal practice, which is limited to just distressed housing, so I do loss mitigation for distressed housing, people who are losing their house, in danger of losing their house, things like that. I get calls every now and then from people who are trustees of estates, and these calls usually relate to the fact that maybe there's a co-trustee or something like that, and there's infighting between the trustees. Mm-hmm. I see that a lot. So how do you personally recommend, or how do you talk to somebody about who they should appoint as a trustee, and what are the alternatives to appointing a family member as a trustee?
So to your first question, I think you bring up a good point. I'm not a big fan of co-trustees, and I explain, what the drawbacks are to the client. Because sometimes the most common scenario is they'll say, well, I really want to list my 2 children. So then I kind of go under the hood and say, okay, well, do your children get along? And usually they say yes. And I go, do they really get along? I mean, do you really think that they wouldn't fight? So, that's question number 1, because there are situations where it's okay. And the second question is, what are the alternatives? Well, you could list a private fiduciary. So there are people that are licensed by the state as private fiduciaries that do this. Some of them have accounting degrees or they're CPAs. Some of them are, just more sophisticated in being that, filling that role, and they're licensed by the state. And then there are trust companies, banks. Most of the time a financial advisor cannot act as your fiduciary in that capacity. So we get asked that a lot of times. Well, I want to list my financial advisor. Well, I would say most of them, due to their regulation and licensing, cannot do that. They would make a good choice if you really trust that person. But, CPAs, attorneys, a close family friend, a business associate. So there are a whole host of types of trustees. And, you got to think about, from an asset protection standpoint too, who that trustee is. Are they an interested trustee, meaning are they related or subordinate to you, or are they a fully independent trustee? So, you could have some provisions in your document that could give you some asset protection as a surviving spouse or as a child that's going to inherit from that trust. But if those aren't there, then it's really not going to come into play, but it could. So the type of trustee could.
And I think that's a really, really important point, because I had a client, I was helping them sell a commercial property in Los Angeles. And they had appointed, I guess their mother had appointed their attorney as a trustee. And there were 3 children, and one of the children came and talked to me and said, well, I just don't know why my mom picked this guy as the trustee and not us. It was interesting because during the course of the sale, they literally went at each other, the 3 children, and they could not make a choice to literally could not make a choice together. They were so polarized. And I started thinking, and I said, their mom was really, really, really smart to not appoint one or multiple of her own children to be, the trustees. I think in that situation, the mother really, really thought about it and thought, hey, it might be a better idea for me to appoint a disinterested person to be the trustee in that situation. So that kind of illustrates your point of, why somebody might not pick, their children. They might think everything's great now, but as soon as, you're gone and, there's money at stake, people change, and it can cause infighting among children. Well, we're going to go to break now. After the break, we're going to come back and talk to Brenda Geiger of Geiger Law Office a little bit about elder law. You're listening to the Michael Gaddis Show on AM 1170, The Answer.